You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, well, hello everybody. I'm Eric Vansel, and as you can see, Daryl's not here yet, but hopefully that's a temporary situation. He is working to resolve any technical issues that he's having. Apparently he's having internet issues, with some of the storms that we've had, some of the things that have been going through. Unfortunately, that's what happens. And again, we thank everybody for the support, but to be completely honest, until we're able to do this as a full-time gig or, we get maybe a little bit more monetary support, unfortunately, this kind of thing is going to happen. So hopefully Daryl will be able to join us soon. But hey, I can't let that stop us from discussing this really phenomenal final episode of Tales of the Jedi. Tales of the Jedi, he's back. There he is. All right. Fortunately, I didn't have to get too far past my intro here before I was able to introduce you. So, say something so I do know that there's audio coming through. All right.
What's going on, man?
All right. Well, so I was just basically talking about and trying to introduce this new phenomenal episode of Tales of the Jedi, what is actually the final episode of this season. Now, the question, of course, is going to become, will they do another season of this show? Now, I don't know. I personally haven't heard anything. I don't know if you've heard anything or not, but...
No, I haven't heard much about this, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny because this whole thing came up. I'm just trying to access my notes here because I do have quite a few notes when we actually get into this. But yeah, I haven't really heard anything about this whole thing, about at least as far as the season 2 goes. Now, I'm sure that at some point they're going to make some sort of announcement. Now, I don't know if this is just, like I said, a one and done type of a thing, if they just wanted to fill in a little bit of canon stuff, or if this is actually going to be something that carries on for maybe a couple of seasons, at least 2 or 3. We don't know. I mean, it's really interesting. If any of you guys know, certainly leave it in the comments section. And hey, while you're at it, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button if you haven't done so already. If you like good Star Wars discussion and you want to feel that people are talking to you, not at you, this is the place to be. So you haven't heard anything either then, as far as any kind of a season 2 or a continuation of the show?
No, unfortunately, because I really do enjoy this series, but no, I have not.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because it being only 15 minutes per episode or whatever it is, it almost seemed like this was a show that was to scratch an itch that Filoni had, that there were some unfinished things that he wanted to talk about, that he wanted to present to the audience. I mean, I don't know. It's really kind of interesting because really when you think about it, even putting this whole show in, because he's busy doing the Bad Batch, and he's got, of course, the Ahsoka series, the live-action Ahsoka series. He has, of course, The Mandalorian Season 3. There's a lot of things that are going on. So what's really interesting to me, and continues to be intriguing, is where he even found time to weave this in, and why he did, and what his end game was. Now, that could very well be our fault, too. Maybe we just didn't read enough about it before, because I remember when this thing dropped, I mean, we were talking about it a little bit, but I mean, neither one of us really spent a lot of time trying to investigate it or, get to the bottom of it or whatever. We're just kind of like, yeah, this show's coming up and, we'll see how good it is.
Well, I mean, I think Tales of the Jedi, once again, I think it's just another thing from Lucasfilm where they're trying to fill in little gaps and holes within the Skywalker saga to kind of complete it. Where I think that in some regards, it's cool, but then in other ways, some things we don't need.
Yeah.
But and I think a lot of people are eventually kind of getting worn of the whole Skywalker saga, because it's like, okay, what else do we need to know about this era, really? I mean, granted, I'm sure there's a lot that you could bring out sure, but I mean the meat and potatoes of it all is pretty much been laid out for us. We know pretty much of what happened.
All right,
So
so it sounds to me like what you're saying is okay, I appreciate all these little nuggets and all this fill in type information, but maybe enough is enough. Maybe it's time to move on to something new.
yeah, and like you said, that's why I love the fact that they're doing an Ahsoka series because here's a character that has survived, you know, Order 66 has, made it past the original trilogy, has made it into the sequel era. So, okay, if we're gonna delve into her, if we're gonna go back into those lanes, then let it be for a justifiable reason. Like,
Yeah.
okay, Ahsoka, because we know she is a thread that kind of goes through that whole time period. You can talk about everything that was going on with her while the Skywalker saga was being played, the Luke Skywalker saga was being played out, how she reacted to it, what was going on with her in the galaxy. Okay, I can understand that. Like, oh, did you hear the Emperor just blew up Alderaan? And, something like that. Like, okay, I can see that from that particular standpoint, but to be in the same lane as the original trilogy, I think we need to get away from.
Well, and I can certainly understand that because from my own standpoint, again, I'm somewhat of a canon junkie. I mean, I really do enjoy the whole fill in stuff because if you really think about it, when you look at the Skywalker saga, it really is so vast and so big that you really could start to tell it from the other perspectives. Now, you bring up a good point, though, is the fact that Ahsoka may be, I could be wrong, but I think she's the only character that really spans the entire thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like she's the only one that basically links the prequels, and she doesn't really pop up in the sequel trilogy yet, but we know thanks to her appearance in The Mandalorian, in the Book of Boba Fett, soon to be her own series, which all takes place around that
Mm-hmm.
same time. Okay, we know at least she's beyond the original trilogy.
Right.
Um, you know, David's with us. He's basically, just talking about his Michigan Wolverines, and then saying hello, John. I'll spare basically the Star Wars audience uh, from these comments, but let's just say that David is joining us tonight. Uh, Probably, I'm sure Ronaldo might pop on at some point. We got our regulars, so that's good. But yeah, we can. I think we can. I think we have enough of the framework that we can start getting into today's episode. Which, of course, again, this is a little different because this series was really dropped on us all at once. It's not like the other shows that we've been witnessing where pretty much everything is a week to week type of a thing, and it's presented to us. And when we would do the reviews, obviously we're reviewing whatever the current episode is. So, if we were reviewing episode 3, everybody only has seen episode 3. Whereas with
Mm-hmm.
this one, this show dropped in like October or something like that, I think it
Yeah.
was. So we're pretty much we're reviewing this on a week to week basis. But I mean, honestly, this episode has been out since the middle of October. So in a way, I don't know. I was really toying with the idea when this whole thing came out that maybe we should have just reviewed the series, or another thing that we could have done. And again, you guys' input is really important to us too on this. If they do another series like this where they just drop every episode, like let's say it's like 10 episodes, right? And they just
Mm-hmm.
drop the entire show on us. What we could do is just do pre-recorded shows and just drop all 10, reviews. Excuse me. So, that's something we can do, but we can entertain that. But again, we did end up doing this on a week-to-week basis because honestly, even though these things are only 15 minutes, and this is where I'll kick it off, and then you can maybe start talking about your thoughts on this and we can get in more in depth. But let's just set it up like this. First of all, I really like the fact that this series was bookended by Ahsoka. It began with her birth and basically the events that led her being discovered by the Jedi Order. The fact that her tribe was like, you know what, this chick might be a Jedi, so let's bring her to the Order. And then it ends pretty much with her exile and her coming out of it, because I have a feeling that this episode takes place, because there is a time jump, right? It starts out with the whole Padme funeral and stuff. So it's really taking place at first at the end of Revenge of the Sith. And then an indiscriminate amount of time passes, and then it picks up with, pretty much after a while, Bail says, okay, now do you want to join the fight? So if I was a betting man, I would guess that part of it is taking place right before we see her in Rebels. So I think that it's basically bookending the beginning of her life and her journey as a Jedi, and then the series concludes with her basically coming back to the fight, so to speak. So I thought that was a really interesting bookend to the whole thing. But, there's a lot, even though these things are only 15 minutes on average, they're very impactful. So with that, I'll turn it over to you first to give some thoughts on the episode. Then, of course, I'll give some thoughts on the episode. And then, naturally, we both give thoughts on the episode and we entertain our live audience. So, go for it.
This episode was really cool for me. I really enjoyed it, like I did all the other ones that preceded it. I think you're absolutely correct that it starts off at the end of Revenge of the Sith, and then we matriculate to the very beginning of Rebels, or the precursor to her appearance in Rebels. And I think that's just important, because now we kind of see, okay, this is what she was doing prior to, and then this has kind of been her mission. She's kind of been trying to fight, because she kind of becomes a freedom fighter, pretty much. She's not aligned with any particular order, so to speak. So she's not a Jedi anymore. She's not necessarily, she's kind of a part of the rebellion in a way, but kind of not. She's kind of, almost like a mercenary in a way. So in this episode, I really, like the fact that how she tried to keep a low profile, much like Obi-Wan did on his series, of where Order 66 has gone on and she's trying to keep a low profile. She's not trying to draw attention to herself or bring this whole little community in danger, which eventually happens. So she has to eventually use her Jedi powers or her Force abilities to save someone from getting hurt. But in the end, trying to be discreet, she ends up revealing herself as a Force user. So now she's kind of in this bit of a quandary of, do I let these people know who I really am or what I really am, or do I just keep playing the role like, no, you're crazy, you're seeing things, or
All right. Well, I mean, again, I agree. I mean, actually, it was funny because at the point where she was in exile and she was just pretty much working in that field or whatever it was, I basically got the same vibe. I got the total Obi-Wan, I'm just working a regular job. Order 66 has happened. I'm just going to have a low profile. One of the things, let me find this in my... Yeah, I said that Ahsoka using the Force while in hiding is a recurring theme in this era. And that's noted in the Obi-Wan series, because there's a lot of instances where Obi-Wan was tempted to use the Force but didn't. And then there were other cases, like when he had to save Leia or whatever, that he actually did use the Force, and that reveals him to be a Jedi. So during this era, you had, obviously, this episode of Tales of the Jedi. You had the Obi-Wan series. You have the New Dawn book, where Kanan, basically being a Padawan, is also tempted to use the Force, but no matter how dire the situation, he has to resist that temptation because it comes to, do you let somebody perish? Do you let somebody who is in trouble, do you just let it go? Or do you risk revealing that you're a Jedi by using the Force? And that's a recurring theme in this. So in a New Dawn novel, and then of course the Jedi Fallen Order game, that was a really huge thing. So this is one of those themes that definitely recurs throughout the whole thing. And I really like the fact that it opened with that Padme funeral scene because, again, one of the keys of this was that you had Clone Wars Season 7, which, if you guys remember, basically what had happened was you had Clone Wars Season 5. That was the last, let's just call it proper Clone Wars season under George Lucas. And of course, Filoni was there. And by this point, Filoni was really sort of steering the ship and everything else, right? I mean, Lucas was definitely writing and everything else, but Filoni had a pretty big hand in it. And then Disney bought Lucasfilm, and they immediately canceled that, and they also canceled Lucas's upcoming live-action series. And so then what happened was there was a bunch of unfinished episodes or whatever, and then basically they just released, I think, like 12 or something like that as a quasi season 6. It was listed as season 6, but it really wasn't a proper season. So then Filoni went back, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago now, and actually did season 7, and that was a proper send-off to the Clone Wars series. Now, what was interesting about that is a lot of it was Ahsoka-based. Unsurprising, because that's Dave Filoni's creation. That's his character. But where we got it was basically, I mean, a lot of it, honestly, was Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, but told from Ahsoka's perspective. Because while Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Padme and all them were basically doing their thing, she and Rex were, or it was either she and Rex. Was it she and Rex, or was it she and Cody?
Yeah.
It was Rex, right? Yeah.
Rex, yeah.
Okay. So basically, they were off kind of doing their own thing, but it was during that time. And so I thought it was only fitting that you basically had this episode of Tales of the Jedi begin kind of where the Clone Wars Season 7 ended. You know, now we have the Padme funeral scene and everything else, and now you see Ahsoka, and now we're carrying off with that. So these are some of the things that I noted. What else did I have down here? I had a bunch. You know, you would think only being a 15-minute episode or something that I wouldn't have as much, but you know, one of the things is that when she does face Bail, and Bail's like, hey, listen, you know, you got to take this communicator, you know, you can contact me and all this stuff. And she initially refused and gave it, well, she didn't really give it back to him, but she basically went in hiding when those clone troopers came. I thought it was really cool how he was talking to the clone troopers, but he was really talking to her. I thought that was a really, really cool little thing that they did, you know?
Yeah, I love little clever things like that. Those are really fun and interesting, you know, just because the clone troopers are so naive and dumb. And Bale is kind of codedly speaking to her as if he's talking to the clone troopers. So I thought that was really cool as well. I also like the fact that they slipped Ahsoka in at the actual funeral. You know, when we see it in Revenge of the Sith, you know, it's kind of a quick little pass through of you seeing her casket kind of being marched through the city, but they kind of mimicked that in this episode. But then at the same time, they kind of did a quick glance, a shot of Ahsoka being there, and then as Belle recognizes her, she disappears because she's not supposed to be there. So that explains her absence in the actual movie. So I thought that was cool.
Yeah, that was a nice touch. That was basically what I was saying. It's almost like it picks up where season 7 of the Clone Wars left off. It's somewhat of an epilogue, if you will. But I think that, I mean, another little thing that I thought was really interesting was how they would do the little Star Wars typical wipes that you usually see in
Hmm.
the films. I really appreciate that. Now, let's talk about that kid that was ratting him out, because that's somewhat of a recurring theme that we see in a lot of the series, especially the ones that are made now that take place during this time. We're seeing this all over the Andor series, actually. And that
Hmm.
is, you have a faction of people, the citizenry, that really believes that the Empire is just an extension and more powerful version of the Republic, and that Palpatine is, in fact, doing good and keeping peace. And how, in essence, like in the case of this kid, the brother, he ends up ratting them out and causing the entire destruction of the village, thinking
Hmm.
that he's doing the right thing, but finds out very quickly that he's not. So that's something that we see constantly popping up in all these different series that I thought was really, really cool.
Yeah, he's trying to. Um, he's a loyalist to the Empire, but the other part about it is that he's looking for the reward. He's an opportunist. He's looking for money,
That's a good point, too. Yeah.
and they're struggling. And that's obviously the Empire is not allowing them to flourish probably as well as the Republic once did. So it's almost like that kid didn't take into consideration, like, look what you're having to do. You got to sell someone out just to make some cash, and instead of just doing your normal job, your normal thing, or what have you. But because of his loyalty to the Empire, he felt like, okay, no, I'm going to report this. Like, yeah, this Jedi here, and they send an Inquisitor, and things go bad after that.
Well, and the thing about it, and this is where I think that it gets like it's really poignant here, is the fact that, again, you have this kid who thinks he's doing the right thing, but also, like you said, he wants to be rewarded. He wants to flourish. He wants to better himself. And this is, again, reminiscent of basically what happened during the Nazis' occupation of, well, I mean, not just Germany, but when they took over Poland, they had parts of Russia. I mean, it was just, you basically had this same kind of a thing where it's, hey, if you rat out the Jews or whatever, or maybe people who were against the party or sympathizers or whatever, then you get a little bit of a reward. And generally speaking, it was all a sham anyway. And that's what happened here when that Inquisitor, which of course we'll talk about soon, but when that Inquisitor did appear, it wasn't at all what that kid thought it was going to be.
Hmm.
I mean, it's kind of like he thought that it's going to be like, yeah, you did the right thing. And instead, he's about to actually get killed. Speaking of which, David, oh, that's, what happened?
Ronaldo.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, that's because Ronaldo, let me try this again. No, I think our thing's not working again. So, this is always, always, always the case. Always what happens. But David
Well, why
basically
you?
said this episode
Mhm.
was fire, pun intended. And yeah, it really was, actually. I have to say this was one of the best. I mean, we only have 6 episodes that we're talking about here, but
Hmm.
it really was one of the best episodes. And it had a lot of weight to it, I thought.
Well, yeah. I mean, you're constantly trying to remain in secret. Then you're trying to do the right thing, and then that gets you kind of more in trouble. And then it kind of puts the citizens at risk, which she knew, what she was trying to prevent to begin with. And then you got this kid who's trying to be an opportunist and try to, thinking he's doing the right thing, only for him to realize that he's so far from that. And now he's actually put his citizens, his friends, family, and community at risk. I mean, stuff has been burned down. People are being slaughtered and killed because this guy is hunting and looking for a Jedi that this kid said that he saw, And now it shows once again how selfless the Jedi are, because much like in Obi-Wan, and that's what made this whole episode really cool, is when that one Inquisitor said, the Jedi's, will to do good, is basically like they can't help it. It's like an itch that they have to scratch. And so you put enough pressure on where they feel like if they don't step in, innocent people will die or be hurt. They're compelled to do something about it because they know that they can. So when this Inquisitor is basically about to kill this poor kid, Ahsoka just finally has to be like, look, here it is. I mean, you know, and just do what must be done at that point, you know. and she dispatches of this guy pretty much quickly, which also shows the vastness of her skill set. Like she fought
Yeah.
off Maul. I mean,
Yeah, I
she went up
mean,
against Maul,
and not
and
that
Maul
long
is not.
ago in this
Yeah,
either.
not that long ago. Yeah, so Maul was no slouch at that point. So the fact that he took down us, she took down basically a Sith Lord, and you're gonna send this piddly little Inquisitor. Yeah, he looked cool, but no
Well, that's the
match.
thing. All these guys look cool. And that was one of the other notes that I had too. I mean, obviously, I could have changed this once, I saw the outcome because I was like, well, I wonder who this guy is. Apparently it doesn't matter because he was killed pretty quickly. But yeah, this is one of those things where when you look at this guy, I mean, he looks really cool, but obviously he's one, either not as important to the grand scheme of things, or it's kind of like you had said, he's just there to show that, well, to be a threat to the village, obviously, but then also to show Ahsoka's power, because it's like you said, Ahsoka is really powerful at this point, and I think that people don't understand that, that she is, like you had brought up, look, she went against Maul, and that was kind of a draw, really, but she also went up against Vader not too much longer after this. I think it was like...
Yeah, and essentially, if that's her former master,
Right.
and that's the thing. It's like, and you have to think about the people that Ahsoka has to. Man, let me take that back. You have to take into account the people that Ahsoka has had the opportunity to train with:
Mm-hmm.
Yoda, Mace, Obi-Wan, Anakin, Plo
Yep.
Koon. You got five, probably the greatest Jedi ever as your teachers at some point. You've seen episodes throughout the Clone Wars where she's been with Master Plo Koon, she's been with Mace, she's been with all these other Jedi, and it's like, okay, the amount of knowledge and skill that she had to even be with these guys, it shows. We see that when she went up against Maul, Maul was pretty much I won't say no match for her, but she was very confident. She wasn't scared. She wasn't, she was actually kind of snarky towards him. And, it's just like, now here's a guy who went up against Obi-Wan, a young Obi-Wan at that,
Yep.
killed his master. So the fact that Ahsoka is really at that level, pretty much where Obi-Wan was in Phantom Menace, and maybe even beyond that, really shows the growth and development of that character.
Well, not only that, but I mean, when you stop and think about it, I mean, she didn't even have a lightsaber. She's just about to go up against him, and she doesn't even have a lightsaber. And look how easy it was for her to just snatch it from him and then kill him. I mean, it was actually almost like the older Obi-Wan that went up against Maul in that last, whatever episode that was. I don't remember if that was the last episode of the series or what, but it was when Maul came up on him and Obi-Wan just, like, in seconds. It wasn't even a fight. I mean, he just pretty much ignited his lightsaber and cut him. I mean, it was done. And so
Well,
I think
actually,
that helped,
it also reminds me of what we just saw not too long ago with Vader and Third Sister. You know, when she tried to attack him,
Oh
and
yeah.
Vader pretty much did everything without even touching his lightsaber.
Yep.
Just did it all through the
Yep.
Force.
Well, and that's one of
And
the things that we had always said. Once you cross a certain point in the Force, you really don't need the lightsaber. Let's see if this works. It does. Okay, so David said, "This is why you don't snitch. Everybody died, and it was all his fault. She was clutch for showing mercy. His apology was trash, though. Everything's on fire, and he's asking for a reward. You're not sorry." Yeah, and then he, of course, let's see. David goes on to say, best part was her intercepting his lightsaber and putting his head through a guillotine. Movie magic. Yeah, I mean, well, the thing is that I disagree with that, actually. I think the kid was sorry because he realized just how big of a price he had to pay. Because you have to understand, and again, this is what I keep trying to tell a lot of Star Wars fans. You have to frame this in the time period that it's in. A lot of times you have to remember that as Star Wars fans, we have more information than the characters do 90% of the time. Okay, so we have the benefit of knowing all this stuff. We know what Palpatine really is, that he's a Sith Lord. We know all of the things that he's done. We know all the atrocities that the Empire has committed. Most of the citizens of the Republic don't know this. They don't have this information. To them, he was, just to frame this for you guys, he was the kindly old Chancellor that basically turned things around from Chancellor Valorum, because Chancellor Valorum was, and Palpatine had a lot to do with this, he pretty much maneuvered it to where Valorum looked completely useless and, just not effective at all. And so Palpatine comes in and saves the day. Of course, that was for his own doing, but the people of the galaxy don't know that. And then he framed it to where it looked like the Jedi were trying to turn against him and take power for themselves, and he was able to stop it. And now the Jedi were essentially a terrorist organization as well, and he issues Order 66, and he saves the entire galaxy from them. So from the actual galaxy proper, from their perspective, Palpatine's a hero. The Empire is a stronger version of the Republic that will make sure that you don't have to worry about terrorists such as the Rebellion, such as the Jedi. We're going to keep you safe, and so on and so on. So as a result, it's not really that hard to imagine why a kid like this would say, yeah, not only am I going to do some good for the galaxy, but I'm going to get a reward from it, because that was another thing that was common knowledge, that, hey, if you turn in a Jedi, you'll get a reward for that. And then what ends up happening, of course, is he finds out just who the Empire really is, because, from the Inquisitor's standpoint, nobody's going to survive this encounter to be able to tell what the Empire is really doing. Nobody that is a victim of the Empire lives to tell what happened and to basically smash this facade that they've created. So I think the kid really was sorry when he actually realized what was going on.
Yeah, I agree. He got his reward all right. It's just not the reward he thought,
Yeah, exactly.
And that's kind of goes to David's point. That's why you don't snitch. But I think, and to your point, Eric, it's the legitimate government at that time. So it's no different than if your government is telling you, hey, if you see something, say something, right? That type of thing. And if they build these people, like when we had the whole Al Qaeda situation, and it's like, oh, okay, we have insurgents, and if you see something that looks, funny, report it. You go to the airport, you see somebody drop a bag, go get TSA, right? So
well,
that's kind of
even
where
going
the
in
kid
movie
was
theaters,
looking.
right? All these shootings that we have all the time and stuff like that. It's like, well, you see this all the time in movie theaters ever since the Batman Dark Knight thing. It's like, hey, if you see somebody, exhibiting weird behavior, i.e., if they're dressed in full attack gear, maybe say something to somebody. It's
Right.
so yeah, exactly. So to them, it's no, they're just doing their duty as a citizen. This isn't something. Again, we as the audience know what's really
Mm-hmm.
happening, and a lot of times, I think what happens is that we let that color our view and how we interpret scenes when we're not really thinking about what the characters know and
Mm-hmm.
what would be realistic for them.
Right. Yeah, I think, he probably felt some remorse after a while because once he realized, okay, okay, this is not the way I had it planned out in my head. I saw this going a completely different way. But, now the very person you were trying to turn in is the one who has to save you. And that's just the irony of it all. And Ahsoka even understood, because she overheard the conversation that he had earlier, and I like the fact that they set that up, that he was an Imperial loyalist. Like, oh yeah, Palpatine's trying to do this. He's trying to bring peace and security and blah 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 blah. And Ahsoka has to keep quiet on it because she's like, I know too much. I can't say what I want to say because if I do, now that draws too many red flags in my view. So I kind of have to just act like I don't hear this stuff. So yeah, it was really good. And of course, at the end of it all, she does eventually contact Bale, and she's like, "Well, yeah, I do need that favor. I need you to get these people to a safe location because now that they've been here, once this guy doesn't report back, they're gonna know, okay, what the heck happened to him. So we got to get these people out here because they're still in danger if they're still left here."
Well, and that's a good point too. That I wanted to hop on before the whole bail thing, because obviously that was foreshadowed too. It's like, okay, I'm going to give you this communicator. I mean, some of the stuff you have to do to just, it's a story, you got to move it along. There's some
Yeah, I
things
got
where you're
15
just
minutes.
like, I know this is going to be important later. They're telegraphing this,
Hmm.
but you have to just overlook that and let it go because you understand that they're trying to get from a point A to a point B, and they're trying to do it in a really short period of time. And this brings me to the point that you brought up earlier, where they did actually telegraph that this kid was somewhat of an Empire or Imperial sympathizer, that he was talking about how Palpatine was doing good and all this other stuff. And I like that because, again, this is like a greater world building type of a thing. You have a situation where you saw this a lot in Andor, actually. And this is one of the things that I loved about Andor, is the fact that they were able to spend a little bit more time with this. Andor allowed things to breathe a little bit, and I mean, I think a lot of times people maybe were lamenting over the fact that there's not some sort of an action scene in every episode, but one of the things that I thought was really refreshing was you really got to see in that series the effects of the war on the people and the different sides, the sides that were sympathizing with Palpatine and the sides that were clearly victimized by Palpatine and his mighty empire. And this is where same thing here. You get this kid who, being from this little farm town or whatever, is all about Palpatine, thinks, oh yeah, he's bringing peace and look at what he's doing. I mean, he's just eating up all the propaganda that's being fed. And so he's representing that one viewpoint from everybody else. But then Ahsoka, who directly knew Palpatine and, of course, really understood what was going on and lost friends because of it, she basically had that other side. But yeah, she had to keep quiet about it. And that, of course, is another plight of the Jedi that you and I keep talking about, is the fact that not only and this is something that's overlooked, I think, in a lot of the material, not only do they have to refrain from using their force powers when they know it could help somebody and maybe even save their lives, but they also have to keep quiet about what they know and listen to all this stuff about how great the Empire is and how it's helping everybody and all this other stuff. And yet they know the truth, but they can't reveal
Yeah.
the truth. So that's I really wouldn't mind another series, maybe even Andor season 2. Well, it might be tough for Andor because we don't really run into too many characters except maybe Mon Mothma. And maybe if they bring in Bail Organa, which I think they're going to have to do anyway, because, I mean, he was pretty much right there with Mon building the rebellion. So I think that's going to have to happen. But if they bring him in, you could do the same thing. But I would love to see either Andor season 2 and or another series similar to what Tales of the Jedi has done that focuses a little bit on that. About how these people who really know the truth can't say anything. Because one, they'll probably be turned in prison or killed, or two, it just creates a lot of complications.
Yeah, because then you become those crazy conspiracy theorists, like what we see even in our own society, right? Everybody believes, oh, the government is trying to hide this from us. The government's trying to do this. The government this and the government that. And I think that's so either run the risk of telling too much and the empire gets wind of it and wants to shut you up for good, or you're seen as a crazy person, the
Yes.
whack job that's just spouting off a bunch of this conspiracy stuff. And it's just like, well, how can you say that when, the Jedi did this? And it's like, well, you weren't there. And it's like, oh, and you were. And it's like, now you have to explain it to your, well, who are you then? How
Mm-hmm.
would you know? It's like, well, can't say I'm a Jedi. Well, I was a Jedi. Because then now it's like, well, we have proof that Palpatine, he looks one way. Now look at him, he's all deformed and wrinkly. He looks like elbow skin, and now all of a sudden you want me to believe that it wasn't his fault. But, so
Well, that's
all
why I
this is
say
just
it
kind
was,
of the times that they're in. It
and
makes
it
it very
was.
convoluted. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was perfectly framed because when he got up there in Revenge of the
Hmm.
Sith and it was like, look at what they did to me and how they injured me and all this other stuff when I was
Hmm.
exposing their, he perfectly framed it. And again, we did an entire show about Palpatine and his cleverness and the fact that he was very cunning
Manipulative
and
ways.
and he
Yeah.
can manipulate people and everything and just how he came into power. I mean, I'm not sure why. I mean, I think that actually got one of the most dislikes our show. I think it got like 1 or 2
One
likes
thing.
and like 6 or 8 dislikes or something. So I'm like, I don't know exactly why, but if you find that show, go back and check it out because we really do go over how Palpatine was able to mask his own powers and then at the same time convince the entire galaxy of exactly what he wanted.
Yeah, definitely. Um, Now that this season is done, now that this whole series is done, what would you rate it?
Well, I mean, this is kind of a difficult thing, really. I mean, um, well, I mean, are you talking about the entire season? Are we talking about
Mm-hmm.
the episode?
Entire season.
Well, I mean, okay, I guess we're gonna be at that part of the show. Uh, um, so first I'll do the episode because generally speaking, that's kind of how we did it with Andor too. And David, I'm sure you're still with us. You can go ahead and give yours since you're the one chatting in tonight. And anybody that's watching this, let us know what your rating is out of 0 to 10, what you guys give this episode. But I would give the episode probably a 9.5. I would give the show probably an 8, like the entire series. Because I mean, honestly,
Okay.
I didn't think there was anything weak. Like I couldn't really point to an episode that I thought was necessarily weak. I mean, I suppose you could say that the first episode might have been the least. I can't even really say that's the least interesting because it's how Ahsoka got into the Jedi Order. But I don't know. I mean, this is one of those series that I thought was really good. It was tight. It was concise. It only had 6 episodes, 3 of which were a Dooku arc. So two of which were an Ahsoka arc. Really, if you think about it, there's only really one standalone episode in the whole thing. So, yeah, I mean, that's where I think it would hit. I would think this episode for me would be 9.5, and then 8 for the entire series.
Okay. For me, I would give this episode a 9.5, but I'll give the whole series a 9. For the reasons that you stated. I don't think there was any weak episodes. I think everything told a great story. Um, I think it filled in a lot of gaps. I think it gave us the emotions that we needed. I think it gave us some things that we didn't know. It furthered our knowledge and canon. So I really can't say that any episodes were bad where I'm just like, ugh, this is a filler or this is, unnecessary or what have you. I felt like everything was, like you said, tight and concise.
Yeah, and it was really well done too, actually.
Hmm.
The only reason why I'm not giving it those extra 2 points is I would save those for because look, this thing does not come anywhere near season 7 of the Clone Wars.
Yeah.
It doesn't come anywhere near, say, season 3 of Rebels. So I can't give this a 9 for that reason. Because it just, when you really look at that, or the Bad Batch even, I mean, there's just shows or seasons that are just so incredible that I can't quite rate it that high. But I mean, as far as everything goes, absolutely. It filled in a lot of canon, which actually, if you think about it, was quite impressive given that it was really, if you totaled up the time of all the episodes, and especially if you take out a lot of the credit stuff and everything, you're probably only looking at an hour. It's an hour of real time, but yet it contains so much. It gives us a lot. It gives us some really good television. It gives us some, I mean, they're very well written. It's compelling. The pacing pretty much was spot on for every episode, to be honest. Yeah, I mean, I thought that it was pretty fantastic, actually. Let's see. I think David's got a comment in here. He says the episode was a 13. Oh, okay. You're going above our 1 to 10 rating. Awesome fan service. That's the type of Star Wars I like to see. The season is a 9 because that first episode was meh. Girl Yoda was a beast. She went out like a G. So, yeah, I mean, the whole Yaddle thing I thought was really cool too because, and this, of course, ties into what we were saying about the canon stuff, is the fact that you have a lot of things that we had always asked, and it was given to us. Thing is, though, I don't know how you feel about this. I don't necessarily think there was a lot of fan service in this.
I think fan service in a sense of that they gave us, stuff that we wanted, like battles and stuff like that. I think that's what he's referring to more or less than, um, oh, look at this person, I see they dropped this person in here just for the real fans. I think it was more so giving the fans what they want to see as far as good story, good battles. It felt like Star Wars. You got all the typical things of Star Wars.
Yeah, I mean, from that standpoint, I just look at fan service as what we used to define it from Lucas. Because really, the whole idea of fan service, anyway, if you really want to trace it back, was when Lucas started making the prequels, which we knew were going to differ from the old expanded universe. And so what Lucas would do is he would put little Easter eggs, little things that either reference the novels, or he would take certain characters, like, when he talked about Quinlan Voss in episode 3, who was a main character in the expanded universe, and things like that. That was more a fan service thing. I don't necessarily look at expanding a plot point even if fans wanted it, I don't look at that as fan service. I look at that more as just expanding the current story, because, I mean, sure, you could say that maybe the whole, hey, let's find out what Yaddle was doing between episodes 1 and 2 and why we didn't see her after episode 1. I mean, if you really had to put a gun to my head and say, okay, that's fan service, then I guess I could agree, but I don't really look at it like that. There's good fan service and there's bad fan service.
Mm.
And I guess if you really wanted to say, that would go under the good. David says, series made great choices with the characters and stories they chose. I love that the episodes weren't unnecessarily slow-paced. Another highlight was Dracula. He means Palpatine. Dooku. Dooku. Got to start learning the real names. Choking that guy and almost didn't let go. And that was another thing that I thought that this show did really well, too, is the fact that they showed in the case of Dooku, they mirrored a little bit Anakin's whole flirtation with the dark side during the Clone Wars, where there is time, and this is part of how the dark side really gets to some people, especially when they think that they're doing good, is look, if I go in and I take care of this right now, forget the negotiation, forget the diplomacy, go in there and show force. It's going to achieve what we want to achieve, but at what cost? And that's what Yoda was always trying to caution against. Like, look, one of the keys to the light side, which a lot of times isn't discussed in a lot of YouTube channels, it's patience. This is the key. When a lot of people say, they'll watch an episode of something and go, yeah, this is what should have happened. I mean, Anakin has a point. When he choked out a guy or something like that, I was kind of like standing up and cheering and going, yeah, but here's the thing. Yes, you achieved what needed to be done for whatever mission it is or whatever for the short term, but you've now screwed over everything for the long term. And that's what Yoda was always trying to teach all the Jedi, was like, look, the dark side definitely will achieve what you needed to achieve quickly, even good. But patience is the key, and that's what's going to happen. You got to play the long game. You can't just always do what's good for the short term. And I thought that this show did that. It showed Dooku's struggle, I thought, particularly well. Because that's something we never really saw.
Well, that's the thing I always love about Star Wars. People always ask, why do I like Star Wars so much? Is because of the lessons that it provides. It's the lessons that it provides in life, both the dark, the good and the dark, because in some cases, you do need to show some force. You do need to strike back, no pun intended. However, it's when you do it and you have to look at the whole totality of the picture, and it's to your point that you were just making as far as the patience thing. I liken it to working out. A lot of people in this day and age, they don't want to do the hard stuff like going to the gym consistently, changing their diet, getting up in the morning and, being disciplined. Like, that takes work. That's hard. When it's so much easier just to go lay on someone's table and have them, all right, a couple hours, I'm 100 pounds lighter, and it's like, okay, but you're still going to then like, okay, now your body looks different. Now you got to go back under the knife to tighten everything up because now your body couldn't catch up to it. And now people are starting to see that there's a lot of health problems that come along with that too.
Well, not only that,
you're
not
to take
changing
the quick and easy path.
Right, but you're also
not
not
changing your
the
mentality.
habits. Right. I mean, you're just going to go back to what it was. How many people have had that surgery have we seen that just gain the weight back, at least as much as they can? I mean,
I've seen a bunch of people do it. And,
sure.
And that's the thing. And that's because there wasn't a change. You have to change mind and body. And that's what Yoda's really trying to get you to understand, is like your body has to, or the body has to listen to the force as well, as much as the force listens to your body. And yes, you can manipulate the force to do a bunch of different things, but who was it? It says, yes, the force obeys your command, but he also
that was Obi-Wan.
Yes, Obi-Wan. I forgot the rest of the line. He's like, it
It
obeys your commands, but
it controls your actions, but it also obeys your commands.
obeys your commands. Yeah. So that's the thing, and that's what you see in Star Wars throughout. Because there's times where there's a quick and easy path. Like, okay, if I just walk in, like, look, this guy's right here. I can just. They're not giving me the answers that I want. Instead of patiently trying to find another solution to get it, why don't I just choke him? I guarantee he'll give me the answers then. Yeah, but then now you've created a whole nother monster that's coming out of the situation.
Well, and
So
a bunch of different issues. And then the other thing, too, which goes to an earlier point, is that, yeah, sometimes, you got to strike back. You got to show force or whatever. But where Yoda's whole thing would differ is the fact that it's the intent behind it. Are you doing it out of
right,
fear and anger, which is a dark side thing? Or are you doing it truly because, you just need
it's the
whatever it is? You're not, you don't hate the person. You're not afraid of the outcome or anything like that. You're just expediting the... And that's one of the reasons why you
yeah,
never see force choking and things like that as a light side power. I mean, there's other things. They'll use things more like, the mind trick thing or something like that, where they'll
It's
get
more
what they need.
passive.
Yeah, it's more
It's
passive.
versus is I want to stun you versus being lethal. That's
Exactly.
basically the difference between the two.
Exactly. So, I mean, and that's where I really thought that this whole series more or less excelled, was that it gave us story arcs that really filled in important pieces. I mean, the Dooku story arc was a really key thing in the entire
Hmm.
franchise. The Ahsoka story arc was definitely a key thing in the franchise. So the fact that they basically plugged in those holes in the prequel era, I think it's really cool that they did that, because that really enriches everything else. And I also think that it's a good platform to launch other stories that they might want to do in the future. So I don't know, we'll have to see.
Yep.
All right, but the question is, what did you guys think of this episode? What did you guys think of the series as a whole? Let us know in the comment section below. And also let us know if there's a particular topic, if there's a character, whatever it is, that maybe we could do a show on, because you know what? I think this is our last series review for a while. There's nothing really, I don't think anyway, that's being released anytime soon.
Mando coming season.
Yeah, and
Mando
that's going to
season
be,
3,
what is that, March?
February.
Oh, it was February?
Yep, February.
Yeah, so, was it? Are we sure? Let me double check that, because I don't want to give the wrong information.
Wow, we can be worse than Lucasfilm.
Well, I mean, yeah. Yeah. March 1st. I thought so. Yeah, March 1st, 2023 will be the premiere of Mandalorian Season 3. So we have some time. I think that's going to be the next thing that's released. I don't think we got anything on Ahsoka yet. We know the Acolyte's quite a ways away. So it's going to be a minute. I mean, who knows?
Bad Batch might be on the way, though.
Yeah, it might be. And that might be February. Who knows? But I don't know what to see. Up until then, it's just going to be everything that's happening in the world of Star Wars, and, we'll come up with some cool stuff. So, in the meantime, let us know what you guys want to see from us, and let us know what you thought of this episode, what you think of the series as a whole. And Friday, I don't know what we're covering this Friday. I think we're back to that now. We actually don't know what we're doing now. This is a good thing, because that means that whatever is current, we'll be covering. So look for us then. Anyway, we hope you guys can join us this Friday at 8. Again, we're live every Monday, every Friday at 8. If we're not able to be live for some reason, there'll be a pre-recorded episode in its place. It'll premiere on YouTube, so you guys can still chat in. If you guys missed our big Acolyte plot reveal, we just did that this past Friday. Be sure to check that out. And, of course, if you missed any of our other reviews in the Tales of the Jedi series, we have a whole playlist for that. So you can go back and you can catch up, and you can watch them after you watch each episode. So be sure to watch that. And, of course, we also just finished an Andor review, and we have reviews pretty much of all the shows that have debuted on Disney Plus. So if you guys missed any of that content, definitely go back and check that out. So till Friday, I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.